They call me Main Stephenson. My great-grandfather was a fisherman, and he probably gone even further back than that. We're down to just 3 boats here now. After the war, there was 9 boats and 3 men each boat, and it's just declined.
All his life, Main Stephenson of Boulmer in Northumberland has fished the North Sea in a traditional boat called a coble. Descended from the Viking longship, the coble is unique to the northeast coast. A century ago, every fishing village from the Tweed to the Humber depended on it.
It was the absolute focus of life. I'm saying it was life and livelihood. We're talking of hundreds of boats, possibly into the low thousands at the peak in the 19th century. The mainstay from the middle of the last century onwards has really been the salmon fishery. If the salmon fishery declines or is reduced, as has been happening, then the number of cobles really tends to decline and reduce alongside it.
The shape of them is such that the fishermen can launch them into the big rough breakers that we get along here, and when they come ashore they can haul them stern first back up the beach, but like anything, they have to be maintained and repaired and overhauled regularly.
They do last a long time if they're looked after and if they're put into the right hands when they do need major repairs. And they're also extremely adaptable. That's one of the great things about the construction of the coble. It's been able to adapt itself to the era of motorisation, which very few other boats in Britain have been able to do.
Very generally, people have wanted larger boats to go further afield and stay out several days. When the last one was built in the area 10 years ago, I thought perhaps that was it, because there were 3 or 4 other cobble builders in this area, but they've all retired. Since that time, there haven't been any more built in this area until this one that Lenny Oliver's had built. So really, Steve and Lenny are the only people of working age that could build a cobble.
My name is Lenny Oliver. I repair boats at Spittlebridge, Whitby. I think a cobble's a good one-hand boat, and I fancy building one. Maybe the last one as well.
A new coble could cost £25,000, but Lenny's saved money by constructing his boat himself, with the help of someone recognised as Britain's last coble builder.
Well, I'm working with Steve Cook, boat builder from up the river there. I picked Steve because he's one of the only small boat builders left, really, and good at his job.
It's a long time since I've built one, really, especially a cobble. Well, when I started in the early 70s, it was very busy. There was whitefish grants available to help the fishermen to get a boat, and I think that continued till about 1980 or 81, and then it started to drop off seriously. The general fishing boats, it's been in decline for probably about 6 or 7 years now, because the government introduced licences, which meant every boat fishing for profit had to have a licence. So everyone that could prove they were doing that were issued with a licence. But any part-timers weren't allowed to get a licence. So a lot of the part-timers couldn't sort of do it for pleasure or to earn a few quid anymore. So it got rid of a lot of customers for us, really.
Robert Oliver, my brother, he's partner in this building shop. Any steelwork, he'll do any steelwork. So between the 3 of us, I thought we'd build a good boat.
The frame's made from oak, what we call grown oak, and mainly the branches off large oak trees, which have got a lot of shape and bend in them, and they're slabbed into whatever thickness we need, and we get the shape from that so that the grain is running in the direction of the curve, really.
Well, we've got the drafts to go on. Once we've timbered it out, put the gunnels on, drafts on, listings on. Brother Robert will put stainless steel engine beds in and put the engine in and go from there.
We're fishing in Almouth Bay, mid-July, fishing for sea trout. It's a method that's been worked for generations, like in the bay here. But one time there was 9 birds fished in here, but now it's down to 3. It's just people getting too old and retiring, and nobody taking their place.
The beach net is, it's what they call a T-net. You've got a bag net at the off end, which is shaped more or less like a diamond, and a leading net comes onto the beach from there. The idea is the fish come along the beach and they run off along the leading net into the bag net at the off end. You shoot it probably 2.5 hours before high water, and you hold it back at 2.5 hours ebb, depending on the conditions.
You don't get many days like this, unfortunately, on the beach. You know, it's a fine weather job because you're fishing close to the shore. And when you swell on it can be quite dangerous, like. These are the conditions were like, fine. Yes, sun on your back.
Over a lifetime at sea, Main Stephenson's acquired a vast knowledge of fishing.
Same as any other job, I suppose. It's just what's passed on to you, what you pick up along the way, what you learn yourself. But when I was first there, I was 14. I started with my uncle way back in the 50s. That's all I've done ever since then. I've just been to fishing, like. The boats was fit with car engines in them days. It's been updated, but since it was built, there's a lot more been added to it. Electronics, colored echo sounders, and VHF, and GPS navigation. So it was, they were very skilled men them days, I would say. Probably more skilled than what there is today, because they hadn't the aids what you've got today.
It's not been very good this last few weeks, to tell the truth. The fishing's been fairly quiet, like, to what we have seen. But yeah, it's a sign of the times, I suppose.
Main Stephenson's coble is one of 3 still using traditional T-shaped nets to fish close to the beach. To give each boat an equal chance of the best fishing, the bay's divided into areas called berths.
The berths is, they'll be 200 or 300 yards apart, the berths. You take your turn, you draw them out a hat, and you change every day. And just your luck to be in the right berth at the right time. Different berths are suited by the weather conditions. Some places you go and you probably prefer a bit northerly wind, and another place you like a southerly wind. And mostly when there was 8, 9 birds gone, it was a game of chance. It was just your luck. It comes a lot into fishing anyway. If your luck suits things that haven't gone well, it's not so good. You need the rub of the green in a lot of jobs.
Having shot or cast his nets, Main waits while the tide turns. It's the first chance to relax since he set off at dawn. Comparing conditions, the fishermen maintain radio contact with one another. In the next berth, a colleague from Boulmer is already hauling up his nets.
24.30 and 33.86 start.
Back at Oliver Brothers Boatyard in Whitby, Steve Cook's giving another coat of paint to the new 23-foot coble, making sure nothing has been missed.
Well, the only reason we paint them really is because you'll never ever get paint behind the frame again, so it's really just to preserve the wood. It's got to be done right, obviously, to make it watertight. It's quite time-consuming as well.
Well, the white bottom, it's with it being pulled out the water. If you put what we call anti-fouling to stop grass growing, it peels off. So we do it ends up being white gloss, and it also reflects the sun. Some people say vanish only lasts a year, but if you look after it, which I intend doing. And I just like to see the wood, basically. The Bay Joe, it's my wife's lad. He was called Joseph, born in Robinhood's Bay. The boat's going to Robinhood's Bay, so we decided on Bay Joe. Well, we went out to Robinhood's Bay. A lot of the time I'll be going on my own. If people want to go, they can go. But I've designed the boat to work on my own. Well, I just get it finished and get it over Robinhood's Bay and start working it, really.
I think it's smashing. I think, you know, we've done a good job and it's turned out how we wanted it to. They're normally much larger than this, sort of up to 33 feet, and it's quite hard to get the shape right with a small one.
It's not surprising that traditional boat building is dying out. Over the years, the kind of fishing practiced by coble men has become increasingly restricted. The licence to fish for salmon and sea trout off the beach only runs from the 26th of March to the end of August, so a spell of bad weather can have a severe impact on a fisherman's income. A number of coble owners also hold licences to catch salmon further out to sea using drift nets. But this is only allowed on weekdays between June and August, and net sizes are strictly controlled. Recently, there have been moves to buy out drift netting licences in a bid to stop salmon being caught at sea altogether. It all means that the calendar of coble fishing is closely controlled.
With new legislation, if you catch a salmon before the beginning of June, 1st of June, you've got to put that fish back. After June, you can land them. So we generally tend to shape the start about the beginning of June, 1st of June, and fish that through June, July, August.
To work with him in the coble, Main's lucky to have someone who's very much got fishing in his blood.
Well, a lad out the village there, he's just a young lad, he's just early 20s, John McQueen. His background's fishing. He's been in the boat a couple of years since he started. He's quite keen, I think. His father's a fisherman, and his brother, on his mother's side, they go way back, Stanton. So they were one of the oldest fishing families in the village. His grandfather, his great-grandfather, and even farther back than that. They go way back. Worst it was, that's all really there was, that in the village in the old days was only fishing or quarries. There used to be quarries on the farm. No, there's not a lot of people in the village. There's not a lot of young people in the village at all here.
Whitby's tradition of seafaring, epitomised by the explorer Captain James Cook, has shaped the town's history. For centuries, boats of all sizes have found shelter in the deep water harbour, safe from storms and the dangers of nearby rocky coasts. The town still supports a mixed fleet. The large keel boats head far out to trawl for fish, while the sea closer to land is the territory of cobles, or cobles as they're called in Yorkshire.
Long line fishing, we're 2.1 mile off Whitby. We've shot the lines now, we're just having a cup of soup. We're just going to take out of this southing end here and start hurling lines, and hopefully there'll be a bit of fish on them for us. Cod is our main species, what we fish for. We do get the odd whitings, the blegs that we call them, lings, and the odd congo you've seen.
Shaun Elwick's charisma is one of only 2 Whitby cobles that still use the time-honoured method of fishing with lines festooned with hooks. It's called long lining.
We use 8 lines a day and there's 210 hooks per line. So it's about 1,1700 hooks. Just over 1,700 hooks I would have thought, all in. The hooks have to be right. If the hooks aren't, properly on the lines, we won't fish properly. So that's the main part, getting the bait on the hooks.
It takes hours to bait the 8 lines needed for a day's fishing. Lines may be similar to the old days, but the bait has changed.
We just use squid now. We used to use mussel, but with these lines we use now with big hooks on, we just use squid. It comes from America, where it gets transported from America down to Grimsby. We get it from Grimsby, and yeah, so it comes a long way before we use it here. We get 8 lines baited a day before we go to sea. We come to sea, take the lines in the state they are in the boxes now, and we get them baited. So when another day would be going in, and there'd be 8 lines waiting for us to go the next day, you know, baited. So painstaking job, you know.
Meanwhile, Main Stephenson is returning to his home village of Boulmer after a satisfactory day's fishing with the beach nets.
It's a good life. You're more or less your own boss. Every day is different. It's far better than having to go into the factory, clock in at 7 o'clock in the morning, clock off at 5. Couldn't do that.
The catch is transferred to a small rowing boat while the coble remains moored in Boulmer Bay. Only when it's stormy is it dragged up the beach, like the cobles in places like Newbiggin-by-the-Sea further down the coast. They're hauled out every day.
Oh, the boats is bigger. The last few boats that was built in the village is definitely bigger. You had to keep them small before for hauling up bad weather, lift onto wheels. There's not the manpower to do that now. But what we do now, we pull them out with a winch on the back of a tractor. So otherwise we couldn't work the size of boats we have. You couldn't lift them on. Well, there's no men left. There's only 6. That's all there is. Where before you had, well, you had 20, up to 27 men working. Our stuff, what's lying in the village here, it comes up to Eyemouth. Fisherman's, Eyemouth Fisherman's, it's a co-op. It's, I may be wrong in saying this, but I think it was one of the first ones, if not the first one, that was started in the country in Eyemouth years ago. And we sold with them for quite a number of years. Oh, hazard a guess, I would think 30 years, possibly 30 years we sold with them, something like that.
Main's developed a close understanding with the organisation that buys his catch and supplies him with bait.
You speak to them in the morning. It's a mobile phone now. You speak to them on the phone, and they phone you in the morning and ask you what time you expect you'll be in, and you tell them, you know, you cannot always down to 5 minutes, and then when you come down, 9 times out of 10, there's the transport's waiting for you. There's a wagon waiting for your stuff, and you put your stuff on and away it goes. They supply you with boxes, bait. You can get bait down from there. You know, sometimes scad, there's a lot of scad used nowadays. That's horse mackerel, garnet, that type of stuff, you know. But all in all, it's can't really complain. The service we get off them, it's pretty good.
Back in Whitby, the charisma is coming into the fish quay. Another day's long lining is over, but judging by the size of the catch, it's been a worthwhile trip. Tomorrow, weather permitting, the crew will be off to sea again. The coble may be disappearing from the scene in many northeast ports, but it still has its supporters among the inshore fishermen. Shaun Elwick is unashamedly one of them.
It's ideal for this job, yeah. These were built for this type of job, potting, salmon fishing and long line fishing. Not really netting, they aren't really big enough for netting to carry the amount of gear that they use, so we just stick with the traditional long lines.
100 miles north, in the Northumberland village of Boulmer, it's a different picture. Fisherman Main Stephenson is champing at the bit to be off to sea, but it's just too rough.
The frustrations of the weather. The job's governed very much by the weather. Like, if it's wind I think wind is the worst enemy we've got. We find it makes the conditions very difficult if you get scales of wind, strong winds. Offshore winds in small boats is not good if you're fishing 6 and 7 mile out, 5, 6, 7 mile out. Offshore winds, it's not so good out there. So I think wind's the worst enemy we've got, small boats.
2 miles off Whitby, the weather's fair, and Shaun's catch is looking promising. But he's not the only one who's after the fish.
The problem we have at the moment is we have 3 seals that's swimming around us. There's one just outside of us here, and there's 2 on the other side of us, so they're probably taking a fish each and we're getting 1. We're just getting a couple of codlings now, but you're up against it when you get 3 seals working around you, you don't get much chance. You're pitting your wits against everything really. It's hit and miss when you go on a morning. You think you have an idea where fish is, and you hope it is, because you need that bit of fish to make it pay end of week. You've still got your bills coming in, you've still got your expense every week, so yeah, you've got to be as cunning as what they are really.
The seals will attack the lines unchallenged until they've had their fill.
No, there's nothing we can do about it. People do shoot them, they have a right to shoot them, but we have no guns to shoot them. They just strip it lines now. Just taking fish, we might get a couple of fish while they're feeding. You can cope with 1, but when you get 3, you haven't got a chance.
My name is Gloria Wilson. I'm a writer specialising in the commercial fishing industry, and I've come to Whitby this morning to see this small cobble that Lenny Oliver has built in partnership with Steve Cook.
It could well be the last new coble, or cobble as they're called locally. Gloria, fascinated by the North's fishing heritage, is documenting the building of the 23-foot Bay Joe.
And what make of engine are you going to have?
Kubota, 4-cylinder diesel.
4-cylinder diesel.
Yeah.
I think she's an absolutely superb little cobble to look at. The shape I think is lovely. Lenny was saying she's a happy compromise between the finer shape of the Northumberland one and the bulkier shape of a Whitby cobble. So they've looked at both and then decided to build something that was a kind of cross between the two.
When coastal fishing was at its peak, specialist boat builders from the south of Scotland to the Humber constructed cobles to their own individual designs.
Although they all have features common to all, people who know about such things can tell by looking at a cobble whether she's built in Amble or in Whitby or in Bridlington or wherever. The Northumberland cobble, they always say, is a very pretty cobble, whereas the ones in Whitby tend to be a bit bulkier looking. The fishermen call it being a bit fuller in the bow, and that is basically because the Whitby men like to have big powerful engines for powering in and out of Whitby. So of course to carry a big weight of an engine there needs to be more bulk in the boat. And also the Whitby fishermen, starting I would say in the 1960s, like to have small wheelhouses, give themselves a little bit of shelter when they're out there, whereas the Northumberland fishermen preferred not to have. So the Northumberland cobble tended to be a bit leaner and slighter looking than the Whitby ones. She's very, what the boat building fraternity talks about being fair. From the way she looks, the actual shape is beautiful.
Well, the hull's more or less complete outside. I've just got the engine to fit. stern tube, floorboards, and winch for pots. Oh, we're quite pleased with it. It's just small cobbles that can be awkward to build, and she's turned out nice.
Fishermen never want to waste a moment, but the poor weather means that Northern Pride, Main Stephenson's coble, can have its annual spruce up in an unusual place.
Well, we're in the sailor shed up at the farm in Boulmer. The boat's been repainted. It's painted once a year and repairs done. And rear is busy repairing the gunnel. It's a little bit wear. And obviously once a year you've got to do this. Clean the bottom and put the anti-fouling on and so forth. The anti-fouling, well, it's on up to the water line. It's both green and it's a paint that stops the weed and the barnacles growing. This is the one that we'll fish lobsters and crabs in all winter. And we go to drift net in the summertime for a couple of 3 months. And then it's back to catching crabs and lobsters in the winter.
Somewhere dry to work in is a godsend, and Maine's grateful to have the offer of shelter.
We're very lucky that the local farmer, Doug Frater, he lets us come in here and paint our boats. We're not really stopped with weather, as you can see. We're all covered in, and well, the sort of date is you wouldn't do much painting outside, would you? So we're very fortunate. We appreciate it. The boat's not in bad condition at all. We try to keep it up every year, as you know, so much done to it. The fisherman's not very patient. They want a job done yesterday. Most fishermen. Well, it's you work to the weather. You lose a lot of time, and when it's workable weather, you like to be there, like.
Leaving Whitby for another day at sea is Shaun Elwick, one of the few traditional fishermen still working from the Yorkshire port. His boat, Charisma, is special. It's a working coble, and there aren't many of them left.
It's all I've ever known, really, since I left school, so it's just the excitement of it every day. There's something different every day, something new. You don't know what it's for you. When you pick the ender up, you could get a big fish in. We've had fishings 100 odd stone, we've been for nothing, 7 or 8 stone, so until you pick that ender up and get the lines back aboard, you don't know what's for you, and that's part and parcel of the excitement of it, really.
Shaun's one of a handful of fishermen who still use long lines like their ancestors used to. The 8 lines on Shaun's coble each carry 200 hooks baited with squid. It's a lot of work, and he's hoping for a reasonable day's weather.
Southeasterly winds aren't much good for us. Well, everybody gets affected with trawlers and everybody, but you know, the cooler the better for us this time of year, colder the better for our sort of fishing. We expect to see a good day's fishing, hopefully. Hopefully we'll get no sails.
It's been calm enough for Shaun's crew to cast their lines, and they'll wait a while before hauling them up again. After days of waiting for a break in the weather, Main Stephenson's finally heading out to sea after an early start.
Journey way before the sun rises. Well, you have a look at the forecasts the night before and decide for them, and the next morning you make your mind up. Most mornings will say the sunrise, put it that way. Well, at the moment we're fishing for crabs mostly, out into 30 fathoms.
It may just look like a stretch of sea, but for the fishermen, every area has its own characteristics and its own name. This is Craster Cars, 7 miles east of Boulmer. It's a good place to catch brown crabs. The pots are worked in groups or fleets of 30. Hauled and checked, they're topped up with fresh bait and stored at the stern, ready to be put back in a new area of the sea.
Fishing this last 1 or 2 winters it's been pretty open weather, and you've gotten there most of the winter and you've been able to pick away. But this year it's been pretty grim this year. we went to March, and I think we've been 11 or 12 days at the sea since the beginning of January. And it's been pretty poor when I've been there. There's not been much to get. When you get a lot of snow and you get the snow goes into rivers, and it tends to take the temperature of the water down, and things as lobsters and crabs don't move quite so freely. They tend to hold up, you know. So what you want now is a little bit of heat to get them to move again.
Meanwhile, off Whitby, the coble Charisma has been patiently waiting. Now it's time to see whether the long lines have done their job. A big haul of cod is what Shaun Elwick is hoping to catch.
We're expecting to see a good day's fishing. We never know with this job. We've shot our lines, and you either get a lot or a little bit. It's hit and miss really. Hopefully it's going to be a bit for us. We had a good day's fishing here yesterday, so we're just going by our instincts, thinking that there's been pots that fish have gathered up round it. Trawlers haven't had a great chance to get through it, so hopefully, you know, we should come good.
Cod feed on the seabed, so the skill lies in sinking the lines to the right depth.
If these lines don't go to the bottom, they won't fish. If they get hung up over an obstacle on the bottom, all the bait will come back, and we call it like hung up to dry, we would say like a washing line. Our sole purpose is to get the lines down to the bottom, sweep the ground, and the fish off them.
Shaun's worked with the same crew for years. They're all experienced in longline fishing.
Well, Lewis, he goes with us winter time. He has his own salmon licence during summer. And then there's Fred. Me and Fred are all year round. Winter time when Lewis comes with us when we need an extra man, and then summertime when we don't need him when we're potting the salmon in. It's just two of us again, so it works out right. We've got all the latest navigation equipment now, you know, radars and such like, GPSs, so it's just a sign of the times. Technology, different type of lines, winches. When Lewis started, it would be hand-hauling them. No, none of these winches like this. It was when you shot the lines, you had to pull them back up by hand, which could be painstaking at times. So we're thankful for these mod cons now. We need these winches and that now. We're spoilt really.
The catch looks good, but Shaun's aware of how much fish he has to land to break even.
If we can get 30 stone a day, we're making it pay. Anything above 30 stone is a bit of a bonus. We want 4 to 5 stone a line really, so if you get 40 stone, it's average 4 to 5 stone a line off 8 lines. But anywhere over 30, 35 stone, 40 stone's an average day. Hopefully anything after that's better for us.
Fishing is a combination of know-how and luck. Main Stephenson's moved his coble to an area closer to the land, where the seabed is suitable for lobsters as well as crabs. A few lobsters would boost the value of the day's catch considerably.
The lobsters gone into ponds, into tanks, and they're stored there until they go into market. Mostly, I think, they've gone to London. The lobsters we catch here are mostly gone to London. I don't think there's many of ours gone on the continent. I think that's where most of the markets are like. The prices don't reflect what we get to what you pay in the shop. It's unbelievable the difference there between what we get for the catch and what you pay. I mean, people will go on to the shop and see. They'll see a carb there, 3 or 4 pound for a carb, or even more. Just a boiled carb in a shop window. You know, we get £5 a stone. That's what we get from it. And you're looking, depends on the size, but you're looking at least 10 decent-sized carbs for a stone. So, of course, the people, the merchants that buy them, they've got overheads and all. I suppose they've got to cook them. You've got to have a lorry to pick them up. Every village along the coast is different. The lobster pots are called creeves here. Some call them pots. lobster nets at Costa, I think. Creels at Hurley Island. Each village I want to call something different, but that's generally that's what they call them here, creeves anyway. They're just more or less the same all the way along the coast. They're made with a wood bottom and plastic bows, choline net cover on the top, and two entrances. There's two eyes, and we call them eyes. That's the entrance, pot entrances, and fit with a bait bag where you secure the bait, and that's about it.
For years, retired coble man Bill Smales made Main Stephenson's pots, keeping an ancient craft going. But shortly after being filmed for this programme, Bill died, and with him his skills, like those of his generation, sadly go too. As the old ways vanish, the future looks increasingly uncertain for coble fishing.
Well, as I say, it's down to 3 boats. Probably die out altogether through time, I don't know. There is, in the village, there's two young brothers. They're at the fishing at the moment, but after that, I don't know what'll happen.
In Whitby, there's a similar decline.
There's a couple more boats gone this year, but regards from years ago when Lewis used to go, you know, nearly everybody went at the job. Last few years, it's just been down to 2, 3 of us. You know, you get odd times when there's 4 or 5, but you know, it's not. You know, there's not as many people go to it as used to go years ago. They're just mainly using another couple.
Further changes in salmon fishing rules could be the final straw.
I would say, from a historical point of view, we're at a critical point in the terms of the coble being a viable sea fishery instrument. It's being supported in this area of coastline in particular by something quite artificial really, which is the salmon fishery. If something threatens the salmon fishery from the occupational point of view, then my guess as a historian is that the coble will steadily fade from the scene. As a widespread working tool, it's difficult to see it surviving.
Well, it's going to put a lot more pressure onto shell fishing, onto lobsters and crabs. If the fears all this salmon fishing out, it did give it a little bit chance, you know. Go and got a bit rest, but I don't know what'll happen. Well, it'll just fade away, and that'll be it, I suppose.
We can get a day's work doing the job we always have done. In 14 years I've this boat. We've always got a living out of this job, so to take it away from us would be very sad, you know, a big loss to us.
Another possible threat to the coble would be a new round of grants to get owners to decommission their boats.
There's an overall European Union directive that has decided that there are too many boats in the British fishing fleet and that some should be removed. So there's a compensation scheme. Fishermen can receive a sum of money to pull out of fishing or to pull the boat out of fishing, but the boat has to be destroyed. But I've heard of fishermen being in tears when they've seen some of the boats being chopped up, because they don't like their boats to be chopped up. You know, they'd be much happier if somebody could use them, you know, for some other purpose. But when these big sums of money are offered, it puts them in a very difficult position. You know, it's like a retirement golden handshake or something. So it is a problem, and there have been some relatively new cobles broken up. As long as the boat is over 10 metres long and more than 10 years old, then the owners can qualify for this decommissioning grant. And at least one that I can think of was just over 10 years old when she was withdrawn and chopped up. And the builder was told that she was in excellent condition, you know, as good as the date when she was built. So some beautiful boats are getting destroyed.
Could decommissioning even affect a new coble like Lenny Oliver's?
The one that Lenny has built, she's under 10 metres long, So if the decommissioning scheme went on and on for years and years, and it was still boats over 10 metres, perhaps she'd escape. But you don't know. They might change the rule, you know, to enable smaller ones to be decommissioned.
Gloria Wilson blames the British government for the policy.
The European directive says that several things could be done. The boats could be sold into private use for use as pleasure boats, or they could be sold to a third world country, or there are various other things that could be done with them other than fishing. But it's the British government that has decided that ours should be chopped up. And the reason they gave to me was it was the only way they could be sure that those particular boats didn't at some stage find their way back into the fishing fleet.
But there are signs that the North East's fishing heritage may not be lost entirely.
The fact that Northumbria has used the coble or the fisheries in its recent appearance at the Royal Show, for example. The fact that Beamish have instituted a heavy object store in which several cobles are stored. All these things are pointers in the direction that we are recognising that heritage. Whether we're too late really to do anything about actively saving it, I think that's an open question still.
I would hope that the skills aren't lost altogether. You know, one just hopes that at some stage somebody, whether it's a fisherman or a museum or a private owner, will realise that there are very, very few people still able to build these, and will think, goodness, you know, let's have a coble built. Let's lose this this skill.
If he'd seen the way things were going, would Main Stephenson have done things differently?
Oh, no. No, I would start tomorrow and take a chance. Oh, no, that's all I've done, and that's all I've ever wanted to do. So, that's been a bad life. No, I wouldn't do anything else. I would just start all over again, chance it.
Still look forward to getting up in the morning, especially this time of year with cod fishing. So just hope they don't take it away from us.
Every day is different, and you just take it as it comes. That's all you do, you just take every day as it comes.
I'm Katrina Porteous. I'm a poet and writer and historian. I live here in Beadnell. I've lived here for about 17 years, and I've come here all my life because my grandparents lived here. I started writing about Beadnell in 1990 when I did a little book of old photographs. There was a lady in the village called May Douglas, and she had a huge collection of old photographs. She still has. And that meant that I went to talk to the older people in the village about the stories behind the photographs, and I got to know a lot of the fishermen then. And really, it became very clear very quickly that there were so many stories and so much skill involved in fishing, and that nothing had been done to record any of this. So that was when my research really started.
Ja, de bomen, you know, but old sack all the for the pull, you know. You know, they pulled it very gently. I knew, you know, what the time we did. As I'm pulling this, you can say him, get by.
Charlie Douglas was one of the great characters of the village. And I took a lot of film of Charlie and his brothers just working and doing things which to them were very ordinary, but to anybody that doesn't know about fishing, they were very, very skilled practices like making lobster pots, mending nets, all of those things that involve skills which are handed on and which I thought were in danger of dying out. When I first got to know them, I was really aware that the fishing was declining in villages like this. I wouldn't say that it's dying out because it's still going on, but it was definitely declining because the numbers of boats were going down. I can remember there being 6 cobles in this harbour, and at the time when I started doing the work there were only 2. And I wanted to make a record of something which I felt had been handed down for many generations, and much of it was very, very ancient. And I wanted to make a record of that because it wasn't going to be handed on. There were 2 cobles which they used to haul up every year at Beadnell Haven, down the road from here, and the Golden Gate and the Jane Douglas. And they would haul them up in February time in order to paint them and do general repairs. And then they would launch them down again in April. And this used to happen every year. And you needed quite a few people for this job because they're heavy boats. I mean, I think they're about 36 feet long. And you'd need about 10 or a dozen people for the job. And they used to go around the doors collecting grease to put on the sticks, and then the boat was hauled up manually using a hand winch where you had to turn the handles. And after she'd been painted, she would then be pushed down again on the beach. And there was always a chant that went with this. You would hear the men shouting, "Howay, whoop!" as they pushed her down, inching down the beach to the haven. And this was the traditional way of doing it, using these flat sticks on the beach. Because at one time, there was no harbour here. Cobles are actually beach boats, and they're meant to be hauled up on the beach. So at one time, this was done very regularly. And even between the wars, when Beadnell Harbour wasn't much in use, because it was all silted up with sand, they used to haul them up both at the haven and at the Benty beach, just down the road from here. Women traditionally were terribly important to fishing. The fishermen couldn't do without the women's work. In the summertime, the women were involved in gutting the herring and packing them and salting them in barrels. And that was a huge job. And all the women all the women from the village used to be involved in that when there was a glut of herring. And in fact, women used to come down from Scotland also to work the summer herring season. And then in the winter, the women's job was to go down the rocks to gather the bait for the long lines, which was limpets and mussels. And they used to have to skein the bait, take it out of its shells, and put them onto the 1,700 hooks for these long lines, which was a huge task. And of course, in those days, they all had big families as well to look after. And not so much here in Beadnell, but in some of the villages that didn't have harbours, women were also involved in launching the boats. They had to help actually physically push the boats into the sea, so their men didn't go to sea wet. The women would get wet themselves to get the boats to sea in places like Newbiggin. Charlie's generation did most of their navigating by landmark. They would be able to line up things which they saw on the land, and know exactly where they were when they were out at sea. And over the generations, they built up this incredible map of the sea floor, which was so detailed they knew every little nook and cranny of the seabed, exactly where they were, where the little rocky bits were, where the sandy edges were, where the seaweed was, all of that sort of information, so they knew exactly where to put their pots. There was so much skill went into making the lobster pots and crab pots, which they call creeves in Beadnell. They call them creeves in Beadnell and Boulmer. They call them nets at Craster. They call them creels on Holy Island. They've got different names in different villages. And they were all slightly different from village to village, or even from family to family. And there was great pride. Each village thought that they made the best pots. You know, there was great pride in the little variations of them. Initially, they used to get most of the materials locally. I mean, in Charlie's grandfather's time, they used to actually pick up driftwood from the beach for the bases of the pots. And then later on, they used to buy the wood in, and they were making more pots by this time also. But they also used to go into the countryside to the plantations to cut ash and hazel sticks to make the boughs, the curved parts of the pots. And they used to have to get permission for this. They used to have to pay for the sticks. But it was all collected fairly locally. And then The bases used to be nailed together. The bows had to be bent to put into the pots. And you can see in that film, you can see Stephen bending the bow round a curved piece of wood called a bow bender in order to put it into the pots. And this is all a traditional way of doing it. When I first started learning about fishing, it was mostly the Douglas family who helped me. But there are still 2 fishing families in Beadnell, and the other family is the Dixons. John is the last of the line. He has daughters, so obviously he has no one to follow him to the fishing. And he's been another person who's been really helpful to me in my work. When you had the coble, the Helenester, here in the harbour, I went out once or twice drift netting with you, didn't I, for salmon? Can you explain exactly what you did?
Well, we just paid the net out, shot the net out, and waited. Hopefully, you would get fish straight away, but I've seen days where you would probably get your catch in an hour, and other days you would keep getting fish coming. Times I've seen us go days and never see one, you know, have blank days. And you usually looked for getting fish at slack tide, when the tide was easing and when it was picking up again. Didn't always happen. And then you had bother with seals. The nets they used in olden days were hemp, and they had to go at night because the fish could see hemp nets in the daylight. But when the modern nets came in, the monofilament, that's when the day fishing started.
The nets that you see in the film are the nets which they would use on the beach here to fish for salmon and sea trout, and they're what you call hook nets, and that is an old design. They're sort of L-shaped with a bag at one end. They're very like the T-nets that they use at Boulmer, in fact. They're made out of nylon though now, whereas in the past they would have been made out of hemp or manila. And they needed a lot more work in the past because they all had to be put through bark to preserve them, just as the ropes had to be put through tar. There was a lot of work involved in the maintenance of gear in the past. And the old manila and hemp nets also had to be dried all the time. They had to lay them out every weekend on the dunes to dry them, whereas you don't have to do that with nylon. What they did here was at the end of every salmon fishing season, in September, then they would go through them to make sure they were clean before you put them away. Otherwise they've got bits of seaweed in them and that rots, and it's not good for them. And they would also make any repairs, mend any tears in them at the same time, which can be caused by anything, just by a big fish, or taking the fish out of the net, or getting fast to the ground, or anything like that. Yeah.
When I started, you could see fishermen were making double the money landsmen were. Now it's probably turned full circle back. Mm. There'll always be a future. I mean, from when I started, it's always been doom and gloom. Fishermen aren't quite as bad as farmers, but it's either not bad or poor. Even if it was good, we would never admit to it being good. Mm.
There are many reasons why it has become so hard to make a living with small boats. There are many reasons why it's changed. Certainly some of the regulations which have been brought in to prevent overfishing from much bigger boats haven't helped, I think. And I'm not sure that the future is particularly bright for small boat fishing. Having said that, people come to villages like Beadnell and see houses because they are fishing villages. That's what makes them special. That's what brings the tourists here. And I think if it was to vanish altogether, it would be undercutting the tourist industry. People wouldn't have a reason to come. So, in a way, I think we ought to be much more protective of our fishing industry. We don't value it nearly highly enough, and it hasn't had the protection that it should have had.